Here we go.
Hello.
Welcome to the Vibe Out Zone. How are you feeling?
I am in an amazing mood. How are
You're in
you?
an amazing mood. We are great.
Definitely.
We can't wait to interview you. We're excited to vibe out with you and see what you're all about. So, should we get started?
Absolutely.
Let's begin with your background and what really got you into art.
Okay, so I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and my mother painted as kind of a thing that she did to just chill out and relax. And I grew up with that as a child, so I was always painting. Um, or using her leftover paints, losing her leftover art materials. That was kind of like my introduction to art. And I wasn't really allowed to go outside. I lived in the projects
Mm-hmm.
in the Flatbush area. And so to kind of keep me out of the streets, she had me do art also. Then as I grew up, I moved away from that and was all about photography. I wanted to be like a fashion photographer. And
Awesome.
that's kind of where my path took me. And so did photography for 20 years. And
Wow.
I worked with just with models starting out, fashion magazines starting out, like a lot of people that were starting out at the beginning. I did a lot of performance photography of just like nightclubs and dancers and whatnot. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I really loved capturing the emotion of the moment. But I also fell in love with the beauty and glamour of fashion for whenever I got to work with that. And there was this kind of dynamic in art because fashion photography, a lot of people don't realize, I think, is that it's very directed.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had this kind of dichotomy that grew up in my art of one being very fluid and colorful and musical, and then the other side of the photography, which was very directed and very angular. And some of the models and some of the shapes that the models could make would just blow your mind. So I had this idea of merging that and trying to merge the musical side, the that fluid side with the angular side. And as I tried to do that in my photography, I felt limited and I felt like I wasn't able to achieve what I was going for. And at that time, I was also in the armed forces. September 11th happened. My whole life was
Oh,
shifted.
no.
And I was actually overseas in Germany. And so I went from Germany and I came to the United States. I relocated, like my whole world was upside down. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to try and do something different. And so photography became just the way to pay the bills while I started studying formal art. And as went in my art degree, I found sculpture and I started working with sculpture. And I thought like my idea about sculpture was kind of like more ceramic based, where I thought you just like
Mm-hmm.
played with mud and then you made something and then you put it in an oven and you came out and I was like, wow, it's art. And that's absolutely not what happened. Um, but in discovering that and discovering what sculpture is and what it could be, I found the ability to merge these two very almost opposing ideas that I could not merge in photography. I was able to merge it in sculpture. And that was just like an amazing revelation for me. And
Mm-hmm.
then at that same time, my journey was beginning with resin and plastic based products, and they ended up kind of just becoming one. So now that is what I do. My art is resin-based art. I make drawings, paintings, and sculptures that are layered, are either made with layered resin or actually casted into molds, or some sort of amalgamation of all of that. So,
I love that. When did you first hear about resin or get the idea to mess around with resin and plastic?
so in 2017,
Mm.
um, I was very, very ill, and I had major surgery. And in the recovery of that surgery, I had to be in bed. I couldn't move.
Oh,
And I got really sad. And there are just so many photographs of your feet that you can take from bed. I know there are lots of photographers who did it, but I couldn't. And my husband actually was the one who found it, because he's like, oh, look, you can make these little resin jewelry, or you can make these little resin things, and it'll be so cute. And so he got me my first resin kit off of Amazon, um,
love
to
that.
to try in bed. Um, at the time, of course, we didn't know how toxic it was, or that I needed a mask or gloves or anything, so it became a hot mess. But it was really interesting and fun to be able to have these little tiny glass-like pieces with
Mhm.
color and sparkles. And I immediately, like many resin artists, I immediately wanted to like encase all the things. Can I put flowers? Can I do whatever? So, but that is how it started. My husband wanted me to be happy while I was recovering from surgery, and he got me the kit.
That's so sweet. I'm glad he did. What would you say was your first favorite resin piece that made you sort of lean in that direction of art? And I know
So,
you, yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. No,
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 go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, I know you started with like buying it off Amazon, but what was like really the first piece you created that made you really go in the direction of that?
Um, so I was halfway through my current degree in sculpture, and I had an assignment um, dealing with textiles. I had to make a sculpture that was like a self-portrait
Mm-hmm.
made out, and then it had to be textile based. And I was really resistant to the idea of textiles. It seemed so out of my realm. And so I asked if I could create a textile. And in doing so, at the time, my hair was two toned. Part of it was like lightened, and part of it was just my natural dark brown hair. And I went and I shaved my head and cut all my hair off. And I then took my hair and I soaked it in resin, and then I twisted it around and turned my light hair into and my dark hair into what looked like chromosomes in the little X formation. Yes, I turned them into chromosomes, and then I made this egg, or this cell, basically,
Mm-hmm.
out of acrylic and tile and whatnot. And I fused it all together with resin all over the place. I had like sperm made out of beans and wire, and then this was, the ovum with the chromosomes coming together, essentially from my father and my mother. And it was and the ended piece was called Conception. And it was about the moment that I became myself at a genetic level. Right. But it was entirely fused together in resin. And when I was making it, I had to use resin in so many different ways in creating these textiles for this project. It really helped me come to this idea that, and this understanding that plastic is human. People
Mm-hmm.
are very upset by this idea of plastic and how it's polluting and how it's doing these different things to the environment. But I have a very different relationship with plastic, especially because resin is plastic and acrylic is plastic and even silicone is plastic. Like all of these things are plastic, and they are the product of being human, just like so many other
Mm.
animals have these different things. And humans are not very great with the environment, plastic or not. And I think that the reason that we have things the way that we do with plastic kind of polluting is because humans pollute. And it kind of just put me in this whole another place of like just understanding the human condition through plastic. And because I mean resin is not a non-toxic thing to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was this whole nother level of, so I'm working with something that is potentially toxic. I'm working with something that is a liquid and can be a solid. I'm working like all of these different ways that resin and I interacted, um,
Mm-hmm.
just became more and more entwined with the human condition, with what is it to be human, what is it to be a person, what is it to interact with nature, because there's no way that resin can touch plastic, can touch nature, and and not have that kind of toxic effect over time. So it's just it really became that metaphor, and everything took off for me there at that point. Once I had made this connection with resin being human and resin being able to be manipulated in any possible way that I could want, it's like I don't need another medium. That was
Yeah,
it. I fell in love.
that's
So,
such an interesting perspective. I think it's incredible that you found light in something that most people shed shame on.
well, there is this, especially currently, there is a huge push, um, that plastic should kind of be purged from society, and because of its toxic nature. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I learned when I was really kind of reading up about resin, at first, was that I mean, when you think about it, there are more things in the world that plastic is used of that is just as non-toxic and just as everyday as it is toxic. So yes, we have it in our plastic bags, and we have it, it's torn up and put in the ocean, it's in microbeads, it's in whatnot, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also, it's also when you go to the dentist, it's also what they're using to make your crowns and to make your teeth so that your teeth are healthy again.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing that is that special, coating that's on, like melamine, or your desks and your tables and your some of your plates and whatnot, that give you a safe surface to give your kids food or to drink out of cups, because not
Mm-hmm.
all plastic has BPA. It's the same thing that makes surfboards safe. Like polyurethane is a plastic. um, so it's, there's this, again, this dichotomy that comes up
Mm-hmm.
that, I didn't initially recognize, but the more I learned about resin, the more I learned about plastic and how it is everywhere.
Right.
Um, and how very integral to the human experience it is. I also realized how, there are states of it where it's toxic, absolutely toxic, and then
Mm-hmm.
states where it's not. Like nobody goes to the store and buys a picture frame that has a little piece of plastic in it to, and goes, oh, I'm not going to touch this, it's going to kill me. Generally
Right.
speaking, they're like, oh, I'm thankful that this isn't glass. It's,
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep it and it won't cut me if it falls. Like there's,
Right. And it's safer for children.
exactly, it is in a lot of ways. And that's, It's just this whole, it's a different way to experience the world. And then that translates into the actual art that I make. It's translates into my art by making it very unique and different.
Mm,
Because in the sculpture world, generally speaking, you're considered a caster, which means that you take liquids and pour them into stuff. And you have like bronze casters and cement casters and whatnot.
mm,
Or you're a carver, so you have people who carve marble or carve wood, or that they take something that's like a block or a brick and then they cut into it. So when it comes to plastic, you can actually start either way. So with resin, you can take two liquids, put them together, mix them up, and pour it into a mold or pour it over something, doing it as a cast. But acrylic, like if you were to go to Lowe's and get an acrylic sheet, that's a hard substance. So you can actually cut into it. And
mm-hmm.
so it's a unique material in that you can both cast it and carve it. The only other sculpture material that I know you can do that with is clay, is for ceramics. Um, and then with, unlike ceramics, resin, it can be completely transparent.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's one
true.
of the few completely transparent materials. So not just translucent, but completely transparent. A lot of times people are like, "Is this glass?" And I'm like, "No, it is not glass." So bless glass blowers and glass workers. I can't do it, but it's it is that transparent kind of material, so it has qualities that make it look like glass, but it has the malleability of clay, and
Mm,
that's a very rare thing. um, and then the plastic look actually has a following way back into the 50s and 60s. So, like historically, resin and polyurethanes and whatnot came into fashion, into vogue during the plastic kind of revolution that happened on the West Coast in California. So, at this moment, I am drawing a blank on the name of the artist, but he did become a teacher at UCA Berkeley, I think, University of California at Berkeley. Um, and I know there's this whole like smooth plastic revolution that came out where all the furniture looks smooth, and um all of the chairs and whatnot, they all had this very smooth plastic or plasticine look. And it was because fiberglass and polyurethane were being
mm,
uh, were being used to create furniture, which was like this whole wild thing, right? Because furniture up until that point was made out of wood or metal.
mm,
And that is the era, you might know, your grandparents, they had like this plastic cover over their furniture that had this horrific smell. I don't know about you. I know that I had that. All of my family members, we went from house to house and they had different smelling plastic slip covers covering their furniture, and that all came out of that plastic revolution in furniture, and was kind of pushed into this whole like now we look at it as part of the futuristic movement that was happening at that time. um, Now, if we're looking at plastic, we're looking at it as contemporary, we're looking at it as modern art.
mm,
um, and it all happened back then in the 60s and 70s. So while half of the a lot of times people think of that as the flower power movement and everybody's going back to roots, there was also this corporate culture that was embracing plastic. And now what's happening is, in this modern contemporary age, people who are using plastic are using it to create pieces that are intended for calm, intended for mental health uses. that are intended for a completely different purpose than they were in the 60s and 70s. But it is now
Right.
this reinvention of plastic. And what's really exciting is that because we're also coming into this age of awareness of how we're affecting the environment, our plastics are even becoming a little less toxic. So, like
Mm-hmm.
the specific resin that I use is a type of eco resin that's created out of soybeans and corn.
Wow, that's
So,
incredible.
yeah, so now I'm in this, I still have to use a mask, I still have to use gloves, but at the same time, if I do get it on my skin, if something does happen, it's not as dangerous to me, just kind of bringing back and reaffirming that
Mm-hmm.
plastic is human. In our lives as humans, we're trying to be more environmentally friendly and we're trying to be more whole as the way we look at the world. And now here we are with plastic, and our plastic is trying to get greener, if that's even possible.
Right.
That even the industries that are creating the textile of our lives, that
Mm-hmm.
this is how they're trying to make it greener, they're trying to make it less toxic. And so my art is kind of, it reflects that. No
Would you
worries.
say your work aims to make a statement on plastic as well as sort of your own personal emotions? Does it ever try to get political?
Well, I would say that it doesn't get political. So I know that I could make it political if I wanted to. I mean, plastic is a very easily political topic, um, but I do not hide from the fact that I use plastics, um, and that at the same time I have to balance using plastics with trying to be as environmentally friendly as possible, um, by choice, as well as by, that's the culture here is moving. The important thing for me and the art that I create is that it is specifically created to help just people who are burdened mentally with stress and the rigors of every day and are looking for something to give them a break. That is the message that my art brings, is like, I feel you, I hear you, I connect to you,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what I'm creating. And I think that my art being created out of plastic, when people realize, because I don't hide the fact that I use plastic or that I'm using resin,
Mm-hmm.
when people see that and they go, wait, that's plastic, it it asks them to kind of revisit how how they really feel about that. Does it
Mm-hmm.
bother them that it's resin? Does it make them feel better that it's resin? Do they, their reaction, their connection, their interaction with it, because it is a piece that is created for their mental and emotional and spiritual health, but it is a piece of plastic. So it's kind of a question that I leave open. There are some people that when they find out that my art is resin, they don't want to have anything to do with it. There are other people that devalue it. They're like, oh, so you just pour stuff, and you're
Mm-hmm.
just one of those artists, um and they don't get it. But then at the same time, I have other people that they're like, wait, that's the same stuff that XYZ is made out of. Um, I've made art that's completely out of polyurethane. And I've had a friend of mine who is a surfer came up to me and he's like, so your art's made out of the same thing my surfboard was made out of?
Uh,
Like,
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it's absolutely made out of the same thing. It's like, I don't know that it'll float on the water like your surfboard does, you know? But, and he was amazed, and he had a greater connection to it. because he understands, it's because of the relationship that he has with plastic. So I even have a piece that I'm working on that's like right here. And you can see the layers of transparency. You can see all of the parts of it that are, people look at something like this and they're not asking the question, how is this destroying the environment? They're
Mm-hmm.
asking the question of, how does this make me feel? How do I respond to this? Like
Right.
those are the questions that they're asking. And I think and that is what's important if we really want to make a change. Is there something really inherently wrong with plastic A to Z? Or is it our connection to plastic? And when we're looking at ourselves as human, if people agree with the statement that plastic is human, it's not something you can go harvest out of the grove, it's something that's made by us.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say about our nature, especially when turning back to plastic is so helpful for their mental state? If you go into
Mm-hmm.
a hospital, the hospitals are covered basically from top to bottom in
Right.
plastic, and it saves our lives. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you relate to that plastic versus the plastic that covers your bread that is now floating and choking animals in the ocean? Like, where's the line? Where is it really the plastic, or is it how we treat plastic? Ergo,
Mm-hmm.
how we treat ourselves.
Right.
So those are questions that I really kind of go into when I'm making my art. But those are also questions that, while I don't push them on the viewer, I also will definitely leave it open so that the viewer can ask that question and
Mm-hmm.
really kind of reflect on what it means to be a human in a world of plastic.
Right. It's really interesting to see that split within humanity. How much time does it take for you to complete an artwork?
So the the pieces that I make generally take um, anywhere from a week to 2 weeks for one piece. The thing is that what a lot of people don't see in the resin videos that are posted like all over Instagram and Facebook and whatnot is the time that it takes for a piece to cure. So when you're making a resin artwork, it comes in two different bottles, and because
Mm-hmm.
it's a chemical reaction that has to occur. And so you mix everything together, then you pour it into whatever mold or whatever surface you're going to be working on. And then there's a lot of manipulation that goes on to it while it's still in that liquid form, which is basically before the chemical reaction really starts going.
Do you create the mold
And
as well?
it
Sorry for
depends.
interrupting you.
No, 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 that's okay. It depends. Sometimes I do make the molds, sometimes I don't make the molds. So, like in the case, here's a piece that I'm working on right now that's in a mold. And this mold you can get on Amazon. I actually have I have an Amazon list that
Mm-hmm.
people can click on and they can purchase the molds for themselves because I don't hide my materials. Um, but once they're in the mold, once you do what you're going to do, then that chemical reaction starts. Then you have to wait for that chemical reaction to complete. And depending on how big the piece is going to be, how many layers are going to be on there, how many like how far you're going to go with the piece will say how many times you have to go through that process. And if you don't want to take the chance of the piece breaking, you
Mm-hmm.
actually have to put on every new layer before the last layer completes the chemical reaction. And
Mm-hmm.
it can take anywhere from 8 hours all the way to 72 hours for the reaction to complete, depending on what resin
Wow.
you're using. So, and then even once it comes out of the mold, it never comes out of the mold perfect. Like you see all of these demolding videos, and I am telling you that they are hiding the little parts that are not perfect. And so then you still have to do a lot of finishing work, and every single thing you do to a resin piece, because it's transparent and so glass-like, leaves a mark. So then you have to put a bunch of buffing into it. So
Mm,
even a piece that takes 8 hours to cure and only has one layer on it will still end up taking anywhere from 2 to 3 days after it's demolded to be
wow.
finished. And for the pieces that take longer or the pieces that are bigger, that finishing time at the end goes up. So it can take quite a while.
So that's not including any of your like planning or other creative processes, right?
Exactly. That's
Wow,
just the
that's
creation
incredible.
process.
So what would your full creative process be like?
So for me, a lot of my work is intuitive. So what happens is because I do plan, and that's one of the questions I get is like, well, if you're an intuitive artist, how do you plan your work? So Um, for me, I do a lot of meditation because being whole and having a positive mental state is not just about me creating the art. It's about a lifestyle of working every day to have the best healthy lifestyle I can. But at the same time, I don't have the luxury of sitting for an hour or 2 hours, especially
Mm-hmm.
in the world of COVID. And
Right.
I'm a parent of two tiny people.
Oh.
I have an older child, but he's out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have 1 to 2 hours a day to just sit and ruminate on the world, even though I have a pretty good
Right.
view to do it. So for me, I when I meditate, I normally meditate with a sketchbook and a pencil, or a sketchbook and a pen, or with something in my hands. Sometimes it can be a piece of clay or whatnot. And in that meditative state, I don't actively try to draw, but I allow drawings or paintings or whatever to kind of like those sketches to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times in my meditations afterwards, when I'm reflecting, especially if I'm doing a mindfulness meditation, specific words will come out, or key things will come out that will connect to events or memories or things that are on my mind. And I'll write those down with those sketches, and I'll hold
Mm-hmm.
on to them. And later on, I will go back to those sketches, and I will put on a piece of music to really kind of help me amplify and hold on to those feelings. Um, and then from there, I will
Mm-hmm.
start prepping my space. I will start prepping what I'm going to do. Um, when it comes to casting shapes, because there is a large geometric portion of my
Mm-hmm.
work, um, those molds and whatnot would be are pretty much kind of prepared ahead of time. They're just molds that I use over and over again for
Mm-hmm.
regular shapes. Um, but a lot of times, if I'm going to do something, then I will work with it via color. So there are these just kind of I have this place where it's the drawings or sketches or whatnot that I've created during my meditations. Then it's the music to enhance the emotions that are connected to the sketches. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really important, because a lot of times, I'll talk to artists and they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, I put on music when I'm making artwork. But they forget that the music that they're putting on in that moment is enhancing their output. So I
Mm-hmm.
could be in a great mood and I could be really happy and really energetic and whatnot. But if the sketch that I'm looking at really makes me feel, I would say, frustrated or has more of a pent up energy,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm not going to turn on my techno and my electronica that I listen to on a daily basis. I'm going to like reach back into my 90s childhood and start blaring Tool and Nine Inch Nails. And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to go into my artwork because that will be the music that helps me hold on to the emotion of the sketch. And so I'm aware, I'm very, very aware of that. And there have even been times where I've like said, nope, this music doesn't match. And I've
Mm-hmm.
stopped in the middle of working. I've just stopped.
Wow.
And I'll just be like, nope, I can't do this. And I'll, turn the music off and actually work in silence until I can kind of reset and then find different music to make sure that everything kind of matches. And as I have done this over the years, I have become more and more successful at capturing inside of my resin pieces an emotion that matches what my intention is, because that is the quintessential problem of the artist. Is
Mm-hmm.
I have these feelings, I have these emotions, and I have these tools to create with. How do I make the way I feel resonate with some person that I don't know who's going to look at the art later? And
Right.
um, I find it interesting that you said that you have a really strong base of musicians, because
Mm-hmm.
they, as artists, have the exact same problem. They just have a different set of tools and different instruments to kind of bring that forth. And
Yeah, that makes
so,
sense.
they have that problem
Yeah.
too, um, of, well, this is what I'm feeling, but my audience is used to this. How do I
Right.
communicate it this way? Or how do I take that inspiring trip to a different location with different music and put it in here? And that's the same thing with my art, is like, how do I take this amazing experience that I had, or this difficult experience that I had? Like, I made a piece that's black and white,
Mm-hmm.
that's called Garden of Cancer. Like, that is a serious topic,
Yeah.
one that I'm going through again. And
Oh,
I'm sitting here and I'm like, how do I create, the first time this happened, it's like, how do I create a piece of artwork that communicates what I'm going through? Because it's not just one thing. You don't go
right.
through cancer and go through one thing. You don't go through sadness and go through one thing. Even if you
Mm-hmm.
think of your emotions of love, jealousy, sexual interest, like, none of those parts of your life are just singular or
Mm-hmm.
linear. They're intertwined with so many things. And it's
Right.
like, how do you bring that out? How do you approach that? How do you communicate that? And those are the questions that I am approaching in my process, just as much as I am approaching, how do I communicate this through plastic? How do I communicate this through shape and color? Um, and how do I keep it intuitive and still plan? It's a lot of balls to juggle. And
Right.
even when at the end of my career, I don't know if I would have completely solved that problem, but I'm definitely working towards it.
And you're doing great at it as well. I have a few questions for you actually, just based off that one answer. But first, I want to dive into two of my favorite collections from you. The first one is Confrontation. I love that collection. And the second one is Color Theory. Could you speak a little bit about how each of those were made and how you approached creating each of these collections?
So Confrontation is the heavier of the two, I would think. And it is the one where Garden of Cancer is a part of that.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
Confrontation is very specifically about living with medical difficulties. And each piece has its own, is its own transition of learning about whatever diagnosis that it is, and then going through the treatment of said diagnosis, and then kind of how I feel about having that diagnosis. Garden of Cancer is obviously self-explanatory. Then there are 3 large wall pieces that are 12 inches by 36 inches by 2 inches.
Mm-hmm.
And those 3 pieces, while they're individual pieces, are seen together in this one large piece, and each one has its own medical diagnosis. So, and then there is release.
Mm-hmm.
And release is a 12 by 36 by 1 inch wall piece. And the thing that's really interesting about the whole series is that it's almost entirely made out of black and white polyurethane. And each of those pieces were really cathartic for me. A lot of people don't realize it, but Release was the first one in that series. Although a lot of people think that Release is at the end, it's at the beginning.
Wow,
And
that's interesting.
Release,
Because I
yeah,
would
a lot of
expect
people
like
think
Emerge to be first and then Release to be the end. But
exactly. A lot of people think that Release is the end, but Release is actually the beginning, because Release is this, it starts plain and almost with no texture and then builds into texture. And
mm-hmm.
it is about me coming to terms with the fact that none of the diagnoses that I have, none of the disorders that I have, none of them will go away. They're all chronic. Even cancer, a lot of people don't realize that once you have cancer, it it it's you're never there's never this point where you truly are cancer free. You're just always in remission. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's this thing where they talk, oh well, you've been in remission for this many years, or you've been clear for this many years. So it's definitely about coming to terms with that fact and going, okay, this is my life now. And I'm going to have to be okay with that, because I can either live with these disorders or suffer under these disorders. And so I made the choice to live with them and to try and find a way to have the best life possible with them. Then you come to Emerge. And Emerge was the first chronic disorder that I had to deal with. And that deals with migraines. And anybody who has had migraines chronically, especially cluster migraines, can look at that piece and they know exactly what I'm talking about. There's no words that are needed. But at the same time, when you look at these pieces, a lot of people go, wow, that is so beautiful. And the fact is that, yes, my life is beautiful, but migraines suck. you know and
Yeah.
the thing is that people look at me
Mm-hmm.
and they don't know that I'm going through a migraine. They
Right.
don't know that I'm going through these things, and they see my life and they think it's beautiful. And that's part of the reason why I used polyurethane to make these pieces, is because it leaves you this beautiful, shiny, just, gorgeous landscapes of texture and color and everything else. And then people read what it's about, and all of a sudden they see this beautiful thing in a whole new light. And I'm like, wow, is that what it feels like? That's the question. that is
Mm-hmm.
that is what I want people to. They see this beautiful thing, they read the title, they read the description, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, You look at a
Mm-hmm.
piece like Turbulence, and Turbulence is about fibromyalgia. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2020. Or excuse me,
Oh,
not 2020.
wow.
This is 2020. Excuse me, 2000, 20 years ago.
Oh,
Wow.
oh, wow.
Sorry about that.
You're
So,
okay.
it was 20 years ago. And some people, as soon as they know that it's about fibromyalgia, they look at Turbulence and they go, oh my God, that's a spine. Because they look at the texture and the and they
The
see kind of the
curvature.
way the
Yeah.
curvature of everything, and they're like, oh my goodness, that's a spine. And then Acquiesce is actually about arthritis. So because it's this kind of give and take and back and forth, and it's this point of where you kind of just let it happen because what can you do? And like fibromyalgia, arthritis has its ups and downs, where sometimes it's good and so it's not a big deal, and other
Mm-hmm.
times it's just really horrible, and either way you have to live with it. And I felt that kind of back and forth that comes with arthritis would be best illustrated in the piece Acquiesce. um, but all of them are about giving a new light and a new perspective on how on those medical disorders. And I think that it's really important for them to be as outwardly aesthetically beautiful as possible, because the majority of medical disorders and medical issues that happen to people are on the inside, and they are unseen. And it's not until you
Mm.
know what's going on, it's not until you know someone who has it, or you're going through it yourself, that you understand that the beautiful person that's standing in front of you is actually going through a whole lot of twists and turns. And that's what those pieces reflect. And I've had a remarkably positive response and experience from people, because they have told me in their responses, it's like, this is such a heavy topic, and the way that they feel that I've illustrated it has not just opened them up to the heaviness of the topic without it being heavy, but
Mm-hmm.
also that relevant revelation of, I thought this was beautiful until I knew what it was. And it's still beautiful, but now I have a better understanding. And isn't that really the way that we deal with people?
That's
You're so
so true.
beautiful, your life is so great. And then you realize what they're going through, and then you're like, oh, well, this is still cool though. We can work around this. So, but I mean, so that is that series. And then
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about color theory is different, very different. Color theory was started because there are members of my family who are on the spectrum. And
Mm.
it wasn't until I had to interact with people on the spectrum that I realized, and then had to think myself about, how very much we are affected by color. And I started to just kind of, what does this color look like in resin? How does it make me feel? What does this color look like? I went through all that. And my first incarnation, Color Theory 1, was to make these little tiny magnets that would go um, on your fridge, or if you had any little metal pieces around, and they would just be these little tiny pops of color. And there are plenty of people like, oh, it's a red day, oh, it's a green day, but I kind of looked at it as in, those little charts that say, how are you feeling today?
Oh,
And then
yeah,
you
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of, so I kind of
Yes.
looked at color theory as, you just picked your color magnet for the day, and it was how you were feeling that day. So I'm feeling really green, I'm feeling really blue. Um,
Mm.
and then I started making these gems. I actually have one.
How
Here's
big are
one
they?
that's
I'm so curious.
almost, yeah, that's almost done. It's
Oh.
like 3 inches, and then it's like an inch and a half wide, and they have different facets. And this one, you can see it like transitions from having the bubbles to being very clear and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I started to realize how much just having one of these just up here on a shelf or whatnot, and they change kind of shade as the sun moves through the day.
Oh, really?
How,
That's so
you
interesting.
know, yeah, it is. And I didn't, when you see it and you look at it, I personally, it would just be like a little pick me up, like just this little tiny thing that just changed the way my day went. And so I stopped making the magnets and I started making more and more of the gems. The first gem was actually an accident. I had, uh, I just had an accident with resin and I poured it into this mold that I happen to have. And that was the first gem, and it came out a rose gold color, which was completely unexpected because that was not the color I was using.
Oh,
I don't
really?
even know how, yeah, I don't even know how that color happened. um don't know that I could ever get that color back. When the piece came out, I had it on the counter and the sun had come through the room, and there were just moments I was just sitting at my desk and I was like, that's really pretty. And it was almost like a 2 or 3 minute little meditation of me looking at this color and it just completely changing my mood and helping me kind of purge any sort of negativity or stress or whatever that I had. And for me, I was like, that is what I've been trying to do this whole time. And so it was really kind of this revelation. I was like, oh, I have to try this in different colors and see if it works. And I did. I started making lots of different colors. I started with my favorite color, which is ocean blue. And I actually like the darker ocean blue colors as opposed to that kind of turquoise ocean that everybody loves. Um, but I started with blues and then I moved on to oranges
Mm-hmm.
and purples, and now I'm making peaches, yellows, and greens for the holidays coming up.
I'm
And
gonna cut you off for a second because
yeah,
Instagram is saying we have 30 seconds left, so we're actually gonna have to start a new live.
oh,
We'll start a new live and just hop on there.
no! Okay.
All right, so see you then in about 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll finish by saying that, it worked out and I'm making the new colors and it's just kind of a mood booster. And I think that's awesome.
I apologize for that.
No, I'm sorry. I'm a little long-winded, so I'll do what I can to keep it shorter this
Oh,
time.
no, no, no. It's great that you're giving us so much insight. I really appreciate that you enjoy talking about your work. So,
I
no need to keep
appreciate
it short.
it.
So, but we left off on color theory number two being a sort of mood enhancer. Could we pick back up on that?
Yeah, so it's it turned into this whole project of how color really enhances our life and affects our life and affects our mood. And so many times throughout the day when we're stressed, when we're at work, we don't have a lot of space. We don't have a lot of time to dedicate our lives to having a mental health refresher, a mood booster, or whatnot readily available, um, or with us every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And so the color theory gems are small and they're able to be put on your desk, to be put by your monitor if you work on a computer, to be put on your windowsill. So they're small and they're unassuming, but at the same time, It's easy to get lost in them and have a moment. If you have just 2 seconds, you can look at it and just breathe and kind of put yourself in a meditative place for how short as possible, just to have a mood boost or a mood change or shift. And you can change them out because it's so small. It's something that's very easy to change out. And on the other side, they're also in the realm of being affordable. My color theory gems are $45 to $55, depending on if they're completely transparent or if they have like unicorn sparkles on the inside. As that's just a little bit more time consuming, so they're a little bit more expensive. But for that type of money, especially when we're talking about art,
Mm-hmm.
that is not expensive for a
Right,
piece
that's
of.
not common at all.
No, it's not. It's not expensive at all. And so this is something that is affordable, that is readily available, that people can pick which one they want, which one really works for them. And it gives them the opportunity to just have a momentary boost when they need it. Like everybody has in their home that one thing that they look at or they hold or they eat or something that just gives them that as soon as they encounter it just everything just seems to go right at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of gives them the boost that they need to move on. And so as I'm developing color theory and as I'm moving forward with it, it is about more and more about how does color affect our lives? How does color affect our moods? How do we really just kind of move forward from that? And how do we do that in a way that's that is affordable, in a way that is available? Because again, I don't come like I do not come from a rich part of New York City. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know anybody who lives out of Manhattan that would call any part of New York City rich, but I really didn't come from a rich part of New York City. I came, from the projects. And so it's very important for me now, as someone who no longer is in that environment, to say, what could I do? What could I make affordable so that the people who are still living that life, for my family who still live in that area, that would change their lives, that they could afford? Like, I don't want, of course, I need to have art that I can produce, that can keep the lights on, that I'm not
Mm-hmm.
burning myself out on.
Right.
But at the same time, I need to make art that I can sleep at the end of the night knowing that I helped people who couldn't otherwise afford art. Because when some of my pieces are done, they're $400, $500, $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that my friends and family members who supported me at the very beginning would be able to afford that.
Right.
But they can afford $50 and they
Mm-hmm.
can get a piece to make their life better. In fact, my sister, my youngest sister, is one of my biggest fans. And she just sent me a photograph the other day of her fridge. She had went and bought all of these different pieces of mine because I just had a summer sale, and she had been saving up this coupon that she had of mine, forever, and used it during the sale, bought all of this stuff, and then sent me this image of the front of her refrigerator completely decorated in all of these magnetic pieces of the Color Theory series. And she said, now, no matter however I feel, I have a piece of yours to look at.
So
And
sweet.
yes, I mean, of
So
course, it was like, oh,
heartwarming
this is my
too.
sister, but at the same time, is grateful to have something in her budget that does that. So I'm just absolutely,
Oh,
that's what it's for.
it's frozen.
Yes, I'm here.
The screen I'm viewing you on is. I don't know if you can hear me,
I see.
but I can't hear
I'm seeing a
anything
little
at all.
spinny I see a little spinny circle. Can you hear me? Ooh.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Now I can.
Okay. So I was just saying how grateful and happy I was that people were having that kind of reaction to it, and doubly so because it was my sister. So
That's awesome. I think it's amazing that you still remember your roots and you still try to make your work affordable and accessible for the people who supported you at the very beginning.
yeah, it's something that I try for. I always want to have art that is accessible to people, especially because my art is so rooted not just in the human experience, but in mental, spiritual, you know, calm and awareness and de-stressing. Like, that's not something that only the rich or the well-off should have access to.
Hmm.
And if anything, they don't need it as much as the people that are on the lower side of the financial spectrum. And so if I can make these pieces, and if color theory can help, if color theory can give people something that they wouldn't have access to otherwise, then I mean, that's the point, is for everybody to have access to that. And for the people who are stressed, the people who need it most, to have it regardless of their financial income. I can't always do that. So I
Right.
have other pieces that are more expensive, but as long as I can, I will, you know?
I love that. Shifting gears, what does a typical day for you look like with your children while being an artist, with your chronic illnesses all encompassed?
um, so right now with COVID, my kids are going to school from home. Um, so a typical day kind of starts at 6 a.m.
Hmm.
I get up, make breakfast, then I get them up. I convince them to eat breakfast. And then, you know, and then we get ready for them to start doing their cycle of tablet time and then homework time and tablet time. And for clarity, my two tiny people are 4 and 7 years old. So I have a
Wow.
preschooler and a second grader. Um, and in kind of a twist of events, because I am going through chemotherapy at the moment, I do have family members that are like rotating, staying with me to kind of help me. So even right now, today, my mother-in-law is here and she's helping me with the two tiny people, um, keeping them kind of uh, on task while we're having this interview. Um, but generally speaking, after breakfast, I would come into this studio.
Hmm.
They would be set up. I have either here at the desk where I'm at, or they would be at the desk where I do my casting, drawing, and painting. Um, and they kind of rotate on and off with their homework assignments while I start going through what I'm going to do for the day. So generally, I'll do about an hour of admin, checking emails, responding, updating, social media, and then going through my sketches, seeing what I'm going to do for the day.
Hmm.
And then I actually have I have two cell phones. I have my cell phone for my house number and whatnot. And then I have a cell phone that is for my studio only.
Mm.
And so being able to do that, I can have one cell phone to receive phone calls, and the other cell phone I actually use to kind of video. So I've made, at this point, I think it's 3 different videos of me creating art that I kind of compress down and turn into time lapse videos.
Hmm.
And I make those during my during the day. And then I kind of go back and forth between pieces depending on what stage they're at. So like I had said earlier, there's the sketching portion, then there's the creation portion where I'm casting. And then after that, then I have to take them out and sand them and buff them down. And then from there, depending on the level of finish that they're at, either I will photograph them or I will send them off in a batch to a local photographer that I work with, Vitor Sa, and he'll photograph them for me if I don't photograph them myself. And then from there, I will get everything ready for it to go online to be sold.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, I was putting each piece up as it was finished, but that became very tiring. And I always felt like I had to stop. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm doing my work in batches. So I did a whole batch for my summer sale, and that took me basically from March, when COVID really shut everything down, um, until I think it was June when I really started getting things finished, and then everything went live at the beginning of July. Then my summer sale ran through July and all of August. Um, and now everything's shut down again. And now I'm creating pieces for the holidays. And those will go live on Samhain, which is October 31st, Halloween.
Wow,
And
that's pretty
that will
soon.
run, yeah, it is. But that will all run through the end of November. So it'll
Mm-hmm.
actually be a 1 month as opposed to 2 months. And once that's done, then my store will be shut down again until I'm probably until the end of, middle end of spring, because
Mm-hmm.
at that point I'll be really heavy into my chemo and it'll be at the point of surgery. And so I'm going to need to take a break for surgery and healing, and I'm going to be really weak. So, and that's kind of the other thing, is like, it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's one of
Right.
those things you have to plan. This week is your production week, and this week is your planning week, and this week is,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of goes up and down. Um, but there's always room for inspiration where all of a sudden something hits out of nowhere and you're like, I got to do this right now. So,
Well, I wish the best for you and your chemo during that time. I hope it goes well.
well, so do I, because that means I get to be here longer.
Right.
But I do have to plan my artistic creation and production cycle around my health.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a benefit, but also can be a curse when it comes to being an artist,
Mm-hmm.
is that you have this flexibility, but flexibility doesn't mean that there's no points where things need to be rigid.
Right.
And so at times that actually creates its own hurdle, where an artist will have, they'll be able to be flexible about their start times, or be flexible where they can work from home, or be flexible in other ways. And so then people are always calling them thinking that they have time to do whatever, whenever.
Mm-hmm.
Or people thinking, oh, well, you're taking a break now, so you must take a break all the time. Are you really working? Like,
Right.
you hit those kind of things. Oh, it must be nice. Um, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. But on the flip side, then when it comes time for, let's say, there's a show that you're preparing for, and you have 20 pieces that all need to go across town and be
Mm-hmm.
mounted in, a
Right.
four,
That
six
can be
hour
very
period.
stressful and a hassle.
Exactly. And that's the point where there's no flexibility, right? So,
Right.
I have the flexibility of when I make the pieces and how I make the pieces and whatnot. But then all of a sudden, when it's showtime, then there's like, it's just balls to the wall, like just nonstop. And if you're putting nails in the wall for 12 hours to get the show right, then that's what you do. And so there's a lot of hurry up and wait, and a lot of kind of fluidity, and then just really just heavy restriction that a lot of people aren't used to. But
Mm-hmm.
in the end, it works, because that means that, when my kids are sick, I am able to be there for them. Or when I'm sick, like now, I am able to take the time that I need. And that's the benefits. But every job has its benefits and negatives.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people I found have just not known what that is for artists.
Mm-hmm. It's also interesting to see this contrast play out in your art and your real life.
Well, if you look at it from I would say sometimes it's easier to understand if, instead of looking at it as artists being free to do whatever, you think of it more from a performance artist perspective. So in that case, you'll have a dancer or a
Mm.
musician. They have to, everything that they do when they're not in a show is practice.
Right, right.
They're practicing the performance, they're practicing the routine, they're practicing what it's
Mm-hmm.
like on the stage, and they're constantly refining
Right.
whatever the performance is going to be.
Up until the
Um,
dress rehearsal.
exactly. Up until the dress rehearsal, where all of a sudden we need to make sure everything works, and there are just some last minute tweaks before the unveiling.
Right.
And in the same way, visual artists are doing the same thing. We're constantly practicing our art, we're refining our art. There are a lot of times when we create pieces and we'll stop halfway through and go, nope, that's not going to work, and remove it just as quickly as a routine would be removed from a dancer's performance.
Mm.
Um, and then when it comes down to it, even when we're hanging art in a show, which is basically like a dress rehearsal, there are times where we go, oh, this piece won't work here, or this piece doesn't work in this show, or a piece can get damaged or broken before a show, and all of a sudden it has to be removed. And at
Right.
the last minute, up until the doors open and the show is happening, um, we are, we're just constantly
Refining.
refining it and refining it and working on it. Um, and I think that that's, putting it in that terms has been helpful when I've been describing it to others, um, because there's just not an understanding. It's almost like we're in Oz behind the curtain. So they don't really
Right.
see what you're doing, and they don't know.
Thank you for that clarification. I really like that you compared it to a performance artist because, oftentimes we don't see all of the small little refining that visual artists do, but we think of it more when we think of musicians or theatrical performers practicing the routine or acts. Is there anything else you'd like to say at the Vibe Out Zone today?
um I think that art is a lot more essential than people give it credit for. And I think that in this time of COVID, where there is almost this expectation that people are finally going to take time for self-care, and take time for themselves to really heal during these crazy times, um, that they think about what is really essential to them, what
Mm-hmm.
is crowded in their life and they need to get rid of, and what are things that they haven't had in their life that they could use more of. Um, for me during this time, I have been participating in the Artist Support Pledge, and all of my color theory pieces for my summer sale were a part of the Artist Support Pledge. And that is for every artist, when they make $1,000 of sales, they purchase the work of another artist that is $200 or less, or $250 or less. And so with that Artist Support Pledge, over the summer, I have been able to purchase the artwork of 2 other artists. And in doing that, the money that people have been spending to get color theory pieces to help themselves has also turned around and not just helped me as an artist, but helped 2 other artists. Both of them are which in the UK. And when I went and got these pieces, I didn't get these pieces as, oh, I just want to help another artist. Oh, I just want to help a friend. I went and I said to myself, what would be essential for me as a consumer? What type of art do I want in my house to help me? And
Mm-hmm.
so I went with 2 pieces that are also centered around mental health, wellness, and awareness, because that's really important to me. And I think that the more that people realize that art can be functional, that it's not just about being pretty, that it is about enhancing and helping their lives,
Mm-hmm.
the less resistant they would be to purchasing, um, something that is made by an artist, that's not just machine made, but instead is an actual handmade, piece
Right.
of, and it doesn't matter if it's your favorite mug that's made by a ceramicist, or it is one of my color theory gems that someone has on their desk that really makes their day. At the end
Mm-hmm.
of it, understanding that art and design is essential and can have more than just a simple aesthetic enhancement
Mm-hmm.
is, I think, would be life changing. It's been life changing for me. It's why I'm an artist. Um,
Right.
I would hope that that people could realize how very helpful it could be for them as well.
Right. And I think also any type of art that people resonate with can also be sort of meditative for them as well, keeping it in their space and keeping it as a reminder that whatever they're feeling or however they're feeling is okay and that they will get through it.
Absolutely. There's never been a time that I have lived through so far that has been more relevant to that message, that it's okay to go through what we're going through, and it's okay for us to focus on ourselves and our health and wellness than it is now. Like, if anything, that has really brought that into focus. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it is a time when artists are having the hardest time, because people don't realize just how essential art is
Right.
to their daily lives. So, and hopefully that'll change.
Hopefully it will, and I have hope that it will eventually. Are there any links you'd like to share where people could follow you, etc.?
So, for me, I'm at avabock.art, and that's AVABOCK.ART. A lot of people get confused and they're like, really, it's dot art? And it's like, yes, it's dot art. But you can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on the World Wide Web. If you Google Ava Bock art, you'll find pretty much every link connected to me. Um, if you're interested in the Artist Support Pledge, that is an ongoing hashtag on Instagram and I believe on Facebook also. So you can just hashtag Artist Support Pledge, and that will come up. And you can get all the information on that for anyone who would like to, as an artist or just as a consumer, be a part of that movement. Um, and yeah, I'm pretty open and friendly. Don't be a stranger. You can always reach out or message me on any of those platforms. And I generally get back to people in less than 24 hours.
Amazing. So before we close off, we're going to do a bit of a fast round, and this is where we actually get to know you on a human level. You have to begin your answer within 5 seconds. You don't have to
Okay.
state the whole answer, but you have to begin it within 5 seconds of me asking the question.
All right.
All right, so 3, 2, 1, let's go. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Vanilla.
Favorite food of all time?
Arroz con gandules.
Favorite fruit?
Ooh. Nectarine.
Favorite comfort food?
Favorite comfort food. Oh, fried tostones. Yes.
Love that. Favorite state you've visited?
Washington State.
Favorite road to drive on? If that's a thing.
Oh, well, yes, here. It would be the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Wow. Favorite breed of dog?
Chihuahua.
I had a Chihuahua once. Favorite season?
Ooh, winter. Absolutely.
Favorite animal?
Beluga whale.
Favorite sport?
Ice skating.
Favorite thing about school when you were in it?
Oh, the community.
Favorite place to shop?
Amazon.
Amazon. That's a favorite of many. Favorite type of clothing?
Linen.
Favorite website?
Ava Bock art.
Go follow her, you guys. Favorite hobby at the moment?
Favorite hobby is playing video games. I like Sims 3 and
Oh,
Minecraft
love
and
that.
Neverwinter.
Favorite artwork of your own?
Ooh, my favorite is actually on
Mhm.
the wall back there. It's white on white. It's a meditative piece.
Love that. Favorite artist of yours that isn't yourself?
Favorite artist of my right now, my favorite artist is Rowana Wells. She's one of the two artists in the UK that I bought from.
Love that. And that's all. Thank you for vibing out with us at the Vibe Out Zone, and we can't wait to vibe out with you in the future again.
That was great.
Any last words?
No, just thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. And I also can't wait until we vibe out again.
Thank you. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.